If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial pound law, that is pound 529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. A warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you, as we'll be joined in a few minutes by Rob Donaldson. He does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all seen here in the first few weeks of the college basketball season, the craziness that we saw with these non-conference tournaments, and look forward to what we're going to be getting this week, as we've got a little bit of a bare slate on Monday, but we're getting some of these challenges going down, like the Big 12 versus Big East Challenge, the ACC-SEC Challenge, and then additionally, we've got Big Ten Conference play, which I always find that to be very random, so we'll be talking about that and so much more in the final segment. Going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday, as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had a fun day of college basketball on Sunday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
We had one ranked team in action on Sunday, and it was not comfortable for them. South Carolina State pushes Xavier to the brink. Xavier gets the job done by kind of 71-68, but 16 turnovers in this game. The reason why they won this game is that they got to the free throw line so often. 26 of 36 at the charity stripes. Zach Fremantle, 17 points, 7 boards, but very sloppy effort from the backcourt. And for South Carolina State, Hull was greater than some of its parts, with Omar Kroksky along with Michael Teal coming in off the bench for a combined 30 points between the two of them. As for South Carolina State, they had, I believe it was 10 different guys play at least 11 minutes in this game. 11 different guys play at least 7 minutes. That's the way that they have been running things this season. So very interesting to see what we get from them moving forward. You saw Niagara be able to take down Long Island in what was a bit of a slog by kind of 60-52. A much improved Long Island team, but they go just 7-24 from three-point range in this one. They've been dealing with a few banged up pieces as of right now, so that's been less than great. And for Niagara, they go just 6 of 20 from three-point range. They turn the ball over 15 times, but they do find a way to be able to persevere and get the job done. So does Central Connecticut as an underdog. They take down UMass Lowell 69-67, and they've already pushed Providence to the brink. They've got a nice win over St. Joe's, and in this one, the way that they got the job done in this one was being able to play relatively straight up in the turnover battle, and they allow UMass Lowell to go just 3 of 13 from three-point range. As for UMass Lowell, 29 points, 10 rebounds out of Max Brooks, but everyone else was pretty pedestrian in this one, so a nice win for Central Connecticut. For UMass, not a cover, but they look pretty solid with their offense. They get the job done against NJIT, this by kind of 80-68. As for UMass, they go just 3 of 17 from three-point range, but they were able to speed this game up. They turned the ball over just 8 times, and then you had Daniel Rivera be able to supply the team with 16 points, 11 rebounds. The transfer from Bryant looked a little bit more rock solid in this one. Also looking rock solid was Nebraska. They completely take it to North Florida, 103-72. A North Florida team that's already won on the road against Georgia Tech, along with South Carolina. For Nebraska, though, 11 of 24 from 3. North Florida went 14 of 43 themselves, but North Florida also lost the turnover battle 16-6. Connor Essegian, another 20-plus point game out of him. He looks to be finding his footing with Nebraska. Went 6 of 8 from three-point range, so he was able to pace the way, and he was able to help Nebraska be able to get the job done in that one. also being able to get the job done. How about Wofford just taking it to North Alabama? This by a count of 74-54 for North Alabama. They just did not have it in this one. They shoot 35% from the floor, 4 of 18 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Wofford, 18 points out of Dylan Bailey. He was able to supply the team with a trio of rebounds as well, so Wofford was able to look rock solid, and they won the rebound battle big time in this one by a count of 45-25. That was a big force multiplier in this one. And then with regards to Maryland, they win, they cover, and they bludgeon Alcorn State 96-58. The final. Alcorn State has been one of the bigger fates in all of college basketball. And for Maryland, you had Sultan Miguel to be able to step up. He goes 4 of 7 from three-point range, 14 points. Derek Queen and Julian Reese combined for 34 points, 20 rebounds, 7 assists. So they did a nice job stuffing the stat sheet there. And then finally, you got something out of Deshaun Harris-Smith. 10 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds. So that's a very encouraging sign. If you're a fan of Maryland, this is an encouraging sign as well. If you're a fan of Central Florida, they get a win and cover against Cal Baptist by a count of 74-59. It was tight in the first half. They were up by just 3 points in the first half. They pull away in the second half as Dominique Daniels did all that he could for Cal Baptist. He had 33 points, and Kendall Coleman down low, 13 rebounds. But let's see, guys, you really didn't have too much going on. Meanwhile, for Central Florida, they go 8 of 21 from three-point range. You get 15 points out of Keyshawn Hall. They do a nice job winning that turnover battle as well by a count of 19-11. So big one there. And for Portland, they're able to cover in double overtime against Denver. I know that there's not a lot of love for Denver on this podcast. 101-90 the final in this one. Certainly not the Nuggets and the Portland Trailblazers. By the way, as for Portland, they lose the turnover battle 16-6, but they won the rebound battle 46-32. Vukasin Masic was able to supply the team with 27 points, and for Denver, they go just 10 of 39 from three-point range. They fell a little bit too much in love with the three ball, and it did not help them out in the end. Texas State and Texas Southern played a fun battle out there in the state where things are always bigger, and the game was tied up at the half, but Texas State, they pull away 72-59 the final. As for Texas State, they've been looking much better in the backcourt. You had Christian Turner be able to supply the team with 18 points in this one. You had every one of your starters be able to get at least 8 points, and Texas Southern, they go just 5 of 22 from three-point range, and they lose that rebound battle by a count of 37-35. So a little bit costly out there. Middle Tennessee is the team that's really starting to stand out, and UAB right now at 4-5, one of the bigger disappointments out there in mid-major college basketball. 76-69 the final. I thought that UAB had a chance to win the American this year. Not looking like it right now. Yaxel Lendeborg had 16 points, 10 rebounds, but team goes 4 of 22 from three-point range. For the Middle Tennessee State Raiders, you had Justin Porter go 4 of 11 from 3, 18 points. They've been doing a good job of winning the turnover battle. Played even up in this game, but they were able to be much more efficient with their offense, and they get another nice win for themselves. For Minnesota, they get a win and cover against Bethune-Cookman. This by kind of 79-62, just barely a cover, as a lot of places they were laying about 16.5 points. But for Bethune-Cookman, they actually shot 10 of 20 from three-point range. Minnesota playing some very low possession games, but Dawson Garcia, 23 points, 5 boards. We're still waiting when guys like Mike Mitchell and company are going to be back in the fold for Minnesota, but a nice win out there. And then this was a nice win for Troy. They were able to take it to Eastern Kentucky. This by a count of 84-74 as Eastern Kentucky goes just 4 of 22 from three-point range. Troy does lose the turnover battle by a count of 19-10, but they win the rebound battle 34-23, a result that Troy really needed to be able to get back up and running, and this is one that Kansas State needed to get back up and running. 120-73, they take it to Arkansas Pine Bluff, a nice win and cover after they had a tough time with Mississippi Valley State when they played them. They went 21 of 40, Kansas State did, from three-point range. They won the turnover battle by a count of 20-13, as well as you just had a whole bunch of guys be able to pop off for Kansas State. 5 different guys with at least 14 points in this one, with Akur leading the way with 21 points. And for Arkansas Pine Bluff, just not the same results for them as they went 6 of 28 from three-point range. You also saw a nice game from Elon. They were able to take down the Quakers of Penn. This by a count of 68-53 as Penn goes just 8 of 37 from three-point range. For Elon, Sam Sherry was able to log for the team 16 points. And Matthew Van Coleman, he's a 7'4" big man that began his career at Utah and St. Mary's. He's looking very rock solid for this Elon team. 10 points, 14 rebounds, 4 blocks. That's a team that's providing quite a bit of value. Already knocked off Notre Dame on the road this season. And then you saw Penn State be able to take it to Buffalo. Not quite enough for a cover, but pretty convincing win, 87-64 for Buffalo. Looks like it's going to be another long year for them, but for Penn State, they go 9 of 21 from 3, with Yannick Niederhauser down low, being able to supply the team with 27 points. Ace Baldwin just 5 points, but 10 assists. Did a good job being able to dole out some nice, clean offense, and what has been nice and clean has been really the balance that we've been seeing between overs and unders very recently, as right now, in terms of college basketball over the last 7 days, we have seen 164 overs to 169 unders, so a little bit under 51% to the under, with favorites going a dismal 154, 175, and 6 against the spread. That is less than 47%, and it's been an underdog season. Overall for the season, underdogs sitting at 52.3%, 649, 591, and 19. Meanwhile, overs, a slim lead on under, 626 overs to 617 under. So that's what we're all seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Sunday. Now let's turn it forward to Monday, what we've all seen in these crazy non-conference tournaments and what to expect moving forward with these challenges, Big Ten play, and so much more. We'll talk about that with Rob Donaldson on the flip side right here on Cuts with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuts with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does great work over at the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's been sifting through all the craziness. He's been doing an amazing job of being able to just evaluate the sport all 12 months out of the year. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also does a great job on the college football front as well. And Rob, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And we're done with a lot of these MTEs, and we kind of have a better picture of how good some of these top teams are. And it's been a fun exploration process, and I'm excited, to learn more as the season goes on here.
And how big is it that now we're getting into a little bit more normalcy? Because I don't know about you, but I, year in and year out, have always just had the toughest time with these multi-team events. And right when you can get into conference play, right when you can get into a lot of what we're going to be seeing in terms of like the Big East Big 12 Challenge, the ACC versus SEC Challenge, what have you, I feel like things just get a little bit more, shall we say, balanced, and we see a little bit less wonkiness with all the 15-point leads that we saw blown over the last week or two.
Yeah, I think that was the most drastic part. Is it really did feel like every other game was just a roller coaster in terms of the point differential being favored to one side, and then the other side, dominated the second half. And it's going to be interesting to see, how the conference season plays out when you have, teams like Stanford and Cal traveling all the way to the East Coast, and, Oregon traveling, on a nightly basis inside the Big Ten. It's going to be a real feel it out year. And I feel like if you are maybe, getting into the betting space right now, I would lean away from a lot of these historical trends, because I think it's going to be all over the place in terms of the range of outcomes that you can expect.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that with regards to college basketball this season, it's just a completely new entity. And how much do you think that with everything that we've seen over the last few years, with so many coaching hires, with so many coaching changes, that it does very much nullify trends that I just don't stick much stock into in college basketball in general, because you can't go too far back when you've got guys graduating every 4, in this case, now with the COVID year, 5th year.
Yeah, and I think even bigger than anything right now is the impact of the transfer portal. And, most notably, I think it's impacting those high-level mid-majors the most, because they're able to recruit talent from both sides of the coin, right? They have talented high-major basketball players transferring down to get more playing time. You're also picking apart the smallest schools in the country for guys wanting a bigger stage, and that's what we're kind of seeing, with the A10 or the Mountain West, or even some teams in the American. I feel like that's going to be a trend that's going to continue, and I'm excited to see how some of these A10 schools really do match up along the way.
Yep, absolutely. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. And we don't have a lot of games on Monday, but we are going to be seeing one of those A10 teams. We're going to be taking the floor in Rhode Island. They're about a 4-point favorite right now against Yale, and a total between 157 and 158. How do you take a look at a game like this? Because I do think think that it is intriguing to see if Rhode Island is finally able to get online, because you may recall like 6-7 years ago, back when a guy with the last name Hurley was at the campus of Rhode Island. They were doing a really good job. Ever since he left, it has been a little bit of a downer under Archie Miller, but feels like they're starting to, for lack of a better term, to use a football term for the Detroit Lions, starting to restore the roar for the Rhode Island Rams.
Yeah, and obviously they went from a Hurley to a Miller brother. There's brothers all over the sport, but when you are looking at Rhode Island, this is certainly one of those venues and one of those programs that when it was rolling under Hurley, it was really rolling. And this was a venue that you wanted to be having on your side because of how impactful the fan crowd was and just how Rhode Island would show up in their home games. I remember with Fats Russell in some of those final years before the transfer portal really took over the sport. But I think Rhode Island's a perfect example, right? You know, we just kind of brought up how these high-level mid-major teams can recruit from both sides. Well, they have a guy from Nebraska, they have a guy from St. John's, and one of their best players right now is from Albany. So a perfect melting pot, and yeah, I think they're hitting their stride right now.
Yeah, you talk about Sebastian Thomas. That's a boomerang transfer because he began at Rhode Island, went to Albany, now he's back at Rhode Island. So yeah, that going on. Apparently, you just need to find a few more minutes over at Albany to be able to find his sea legs with this program. But that's a team that I think is going to be very interesting. And that's really the lone of the Atlantic 10 teams that are going to be taking the floor on Monday. But that said, in terms of the Atlantic 10, I know that you dove in a little bit there. What else are you looking for from this conference? Because we saw Dayton take down UConn. Certainly VCU has been looking rock solid, but we've also seen a few disappointments with teams like Duquesne really coming up short thus far.
And Duquesne is obviously experiencing a lot of roster turnover, a new regime at head coach. And, you know, I will say I'll even highlight a couple wins from St. Joe's against Villanova, Davidson over Providence. VCU had looked pretty impressive in their MTE event. And LaSalle under, Fran Dunphy is coming out the gates hot as well. So I do feel like there's a lot of teams in this conference that could really be prevalent for an at-large type bid as the season progresses here, especially if a conference like the Big East is as down as it's kind of looking right now. But yeah, when you're looking across the board, just keep winning your games, handling business against the teams you got to handle business against. And I think sometimes when you have enough good teams stacking up wins, the cannibalization that happens during conference play can actually serve as a benefit because teams are picking up quad one wins.
Absolutely. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the Rob's Best Show, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I am so glad that you were mentioning the fact that the Big East has looked a little bit down, because we had a nice tweet from John Rothstein in terms of records of power conference teams against other power conferences. And ACC is right now 12-28, and they go into the ACC SEC Challenge with an SEC that's 29-13. You mentioned the Big East, they're 10-12. Big 12, they're 14-18. But how do you take a look at the hierarchy of college basketball right now? Because I do think that the Big 12 is better than that 14-18 record would indicate against other power conference teams, because I look at the SEC and the Big 12 as being those top two conferences, but I feel like the SEC has really been able to show some dominance this far this year. Well, to your point, the Big East has just not looked good.
It's just kind of speaking to college sports in general right now. I mean, obviously this is a college basketball pod, but you look at the college football landscape and you have Georgia being taken to 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech. And it's just one of those things that I feel like the balance of play or the balance of talent is really starting to even out across the board. And to your point, you brought up the SEC. They're still going to recruit talent, and I think because of that NIL and the portal kind of using that combination of outlooks, I think they're benefiting the most right now in college basketball because of how much money is poured into that league. And top to bottom, I think you nailed it. When you're looking at a team like maybe a Vanderbilt or an LSU or a South Carolina being your basement, maybe along with Missouri, that's a pretty strong floor right there to have, especially when you have 18 teams. And, from that standpoint, too, they also have some really top teams in that league as well. You look at Auburn, you look at Kentucky, you look at Tennessee. I couldn't be more impressed with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, it has been really impressive, and I'm in total agreement with you there. The landscape of college sports in general, it certainly has gone a little bit topsy-turvy, and just what do we make out of the Big East right now as well? Is they're going to be going into that Big East versus Big 12 challenge, and that's one where I think it's really going to get ugly. Like, I think that the SEC is going to dominate the ACC, but I look at the Big 12, and even though the record against other power conference teams hasn't been so savory, and for Kansas State, even though they blew out Arkansas Pine Bluff on Sunday, still not feeling bullish about them. just look at the entire Big East with the injuries that we're seeing with Creighton, which how they got Steve Ashworth back over the weekend, I have no idea. I thought that guy was going to be out for a lot longer than what he was going to. But UConn, they finished 8th out of 8 teams at the Maui Invitational. Seton Hall is losing at home to winless Monmouth. DePaul has actually looked halfway decent, and it just feels like everything that you thought that you knew about the Big East, well, you currently don't know it with Xavier playing a one-possession game against South Carolina State on Sunday.
And Providence loses to Davidson, and Butler out the gate looked really shoddy and dropped a bye game for them as well. You look across the board right now, and I think if you want to place a future bet on any one of these conferences to just win the regular season, fade UConn, fade Marquette, and I think you're going to actually have a really good shot at some value with any of those middling teams, like a St. John's or, heck, who knows, maybe even a Georgetown or DePaul with how they're playing. But from top to bottom, you look at that league, I don't think there's an impressive team really that's jumping out at me. Marquette picked up a big win against Purdue at home, and that certainly is something to spark it, but they're about to go into Hilton and play Iowa State this week, and I feel like that's going to be a game that serves as a real barometer check as well, and I think they're going to lose by double digits in that spot. I don't know if we're going to be looking fondly on the Big East a week from now, and even right now, we're not even looking at them pretty fondly either.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I do think that that's going to be a little bit rough, to say the least, and right now in terms of the college basketball landscape, I think that there's becoming a clear have and have-nots with regards to conferences, and I just look at the Big Ten being in the middle of those. I think that they're in better shape right now than the Big East. I think that they're in better shape than the ACC, but in the Big Ten, it's a lot of what we talked about going into the season, albeit Washington has not necessarily looked so great along with USC, but it feels like in the Big Ten, there's a lot of equals aside from maybe one or two bad teams with no real contender for the Final Four, but a few teams like Penn State and Wisconsin that have looked better than expected.
Yeah, and even Oregon, right, I would say is one of those teams that's looked better than expected. You can never count out Dana Altman, and even though they went to overtime with Portland earlier this year, they come out, they win their MTE event out in Vegas, and it feels like everything is great. Wisconsin has been a surprise. I think Penn State is a team to look out for, and kind of like what we were saying with the Big East, or at least what I was saying with the Big East, if you want to place future bets on a conference winner here, fade, that Purdue billing or that Michigan State billing and maybe take a shot at one of those teams in the middle, because this conference feels really wide open, and I don't think that's going to become a more clear in terms of the hierarchy as the season progresses here.
Yep, absolutely. As Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the Rob's Best Bet Show, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And, well, unfortunately, we no longer have the ACC versus Big Ten Challenge. Instead, it's the SEC versus ACC Challenge. And just how do you take a look at that conference? Because with North Carolina, I just haven't loved what I've seen out of them. They've been able to look good in their second halves, but they've gotten off to some less than tremendous starts. Duke still looks fine, even though they lose that game against Kansas. I'm not going to be too concerned there, but I look at the middle of the ACC with a team like a Wake Forest not looking so great. Virginia Tech has completely bottomed out, and I'm very concerned for that conference, and I feel like outside those top two teams, number 3, number 4 in the conference, very much up for grabs.
Oh, 100%, and even last year, right, the NC State run was kind of what saved the conference, and NC State doesn't look to be there this year, obviously, with so much roster turnover, and when you also look at a team like Miami, who was supposed to be this NIL darling, and Larinaga is obviously there, so they always have a chance from a coaching standpoint, but they just lost to Charleston Southern on their home floor, and it wasn't really even a competitive game from them, steaming out ahead, just a miracle comeback happened. They got outplayed by Charleston Southern on their home floor, and Virginia Tech, I think, is in the way basement. We've already seen Georgia Tech as well, lose a home game to North Florida, and there's a number of teams across this conference that we thought that maybe could be special coming into the year or be one of those kind of middling teams, and have just hit the basement already. I do think Louisville and a team like Pitt are kind of spearheading this conference's outlook along with Duke and North Carolina. But, man, there's a lot of teams that I think have had their stock go down or plummet in the early going here.
Yep, no doubt about it. It has been so interesting to find. And just in terms of this year in college basketball, I feel like there have been a lot of surprises, both through the positive and the negative. And how much have you had to make, for lack of a better term, stark adjustments with a lot of these teams rather than in past years? Because I do think that the adjustments need to come more quickly this time of year rather than in past years.
And a lot of these mid-major teams that maybe have kind of gotten off to a slow start, I look at like a Princeton. for example, that I'm really still bullish on, but they haven't really played their best basketball just yet. I'm still going to be kind of holding pat on where I have a lot of these mid-majors slotted. But in terms of the high major basketball teams, I think depth is being exposed as a major issue for some of these squads. And, in terms of, some of the hierarchy teams of the past 2 seasons, like a Purdue or a UConn, I'm going to be more willing to kind of fade those sides. And for that reason, this is going to be a really high parity sport this year. And I'm excited for when we get, some non-conference action down the season here.
No doubt about it. I think that it is going to be absolutely tremendous to see what we're going to be getting in terms of the next few months and just how much of a different animal is it going to be the next few weeks of handicapping rather than we get it into conference play as well, because now we've got like the ACC versus the ACC challenge and what have you. And I think that it's so interesting to gauge these games rather than when we do get into conference play, which, by the way, we're actually going to start to see conference play, I believe, on Tuesday in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I'm just excited to see these venues, being on fire. Don't get me wrong, I love the MTEs, I love a neutral floor, but the fan excitement isn't there, and it's like 20 people are in the stadium watching top 20 teams facing off against each other. It can sometimes be a little bit like awkward or anticlimactic because you're so excited to see the players, but the environment isn't there. And when we are getting these home venues, for example, Hilton coming up here against Marquette and a number of other great venues and stores, Baylor, UConn is going to be great too. I think that's what adds another layer of element to college basketball and just college sports in general. And for that reason, I think it's going to serve as a really great barometer. And I think we're going to get some really great games over the next couple weeks here.
Yep, I think so as well. And then in terms of Monday slate, we touched upon one of those games with Rhode Island. Anything else that you're taking a look at? Because I know that you're much like myself, whether it's power conference teams or if it's a low of the low conferences, you do a great job of evaluating them all.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the games I'm most excited about for sure. Another game that I am going to be very excited about is going to be that nightcap with Washington State and Nevada, because this is basically Eastern Washington, versus Nevada in this matchup. And, getting 9.5 points, I get it. Nevada is a tough place to play, but I think Washington State has a lot of spunk and a lot of energy behind their program with David Riley right now. And I'm kind of willing to take that kind of shot and ride that lightning there.
There's going to be some steak on the board for Monday. Not necessarily a lot of sizzle. We're not going to be seeing those ranked teams or anything like that, but you've got that fun Washington State versus Nevada game to wrap up the night. Operation Fade Chicago State. We'll see if that's in full effect. Now you have to lay 19 points with St. Thomas in order to fade Chicago State. Might be getting a little bit lofty there, but something that is always being able to come through for us is you, Rob. You do such an amazing job looking at this great sport of college basketball. Let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you, and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, I really appreciate having me on, and I'm excited to talk ball with you the rest of the way here. And for those who are wanting to follow my bets on a daily basis, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, just my name at Rob Donaldson. And as always, Greg, really appreciate having me on.
It is always great to be able to get Rob aboard. He does such an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and it's great to be able to get him back on today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. All right, guys, it's getting into crunch time with regards to our holiday shopping because Thanksgiving is come and gone. We're through Black Friday. We're in the month of December, and you need to get that unique gift for someone that you truly care about. Uncommon Goods, that is a perfect place to go because they've got something for everyone, whether that be an experience or a gift that you just can't find anywhere else. Like, I've been in a lot of circumstances where I try to get something for my mom because when you're a guy and you're trying to shop for your mom, you have no idea what in the heck to do. Just being able to get something that's a little bit off the walls is what Uncommon Goods does a great job of. Their products are high quality, they're unique, and oftentimes handmade or made in the United States, and they have the most meaningful, out-of-the-ordinary gifts anywhere. They even have gifts that you can customize for those that are book lovers, diehard sports fans. They've got unique mugs, and if you're gifting for someone that doesn't want a thing, they want an experience, they want to be able to take part in something that is fun. They've got classes from everything from reading a lunar astrology chart, some unique cooking classics, mixology, and so much more. And you can get 15% off right now over at uncommongoods.com/coast Coast. You go to uncommongoods.com/coast. You get 15% off of your order. That is over at uncommongoods.com/goods. Uncommon Goods, we're out of the ordinary. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, learns such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_41. Going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is pretty much time order with the bigger conference games, and then the MEAC games, the games out there in the America East, the Southland, the SWAC, and the Northeast Conference. Those are going to be the games at the bottom. So how about if we get things started with 861, 862 on the card, and hopefully we can get online with these write-ups. I apologize about how abysmal these have been the last few weeks. So we're going to look to get things started back in the right direction today as Yale is on the road against Rhode Island, and the total's between 157 and 158. Yale's a 4-point underdog, and I'm going to be writing up the under. I set my total at 152. I have a pair of teams that are shooting 39+% from three-point range. Last year were more around about 35% three-point shooting teams, and Rhode Island has been a top 20 team with regards to their three-point shooting defense. Don't know if that's going to be long-lasting, but wrote up the under. You do have a Rhode Island team that should be able to have a little bit of an edge down low. You don't necessarily have that dominator down low, but David Fuchs has been able to give you about 6 boards per contest. The 7-footer in Javonte Brown has been a rock-solid pickup, 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. It is a Rhode Island team that has taken better care of the ball this year and forcing a few more turnovers than they did a season ago. And the big reason why is Sebastian Thomas. He comes back after he began his career at Rhode Island, spent a year at Albany. He's been able to give you 2.5 steals, 8 assists, 16 points per game. He has been tremendous, and Rhode Island, without him last year, they were one of the worst teams at generating turnovers in all of college basketball. But top scorer in this game is John Paul Kittis, who's been able to log for Yale north of 20 points per game. He overall is shooting 47.5% from three-point range. They do lose a little bit from a season ago down low, but you still have someone like a Yasani Garam, who's been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Nick Townsend has had all sorts of versatility, 4 assists, 13 points, 6 boards. Love what he's able to do, and Baz Hembeg just keeps things relatively clean for a Yale team that's only turned the ball over about 10.5 times per game, while Rhode Island is cranking up their tempo a little bit. And truth be told, Yale is a little bit as well. I do think that we're going to see a little bit more defense in this one. I do think that in the end, Rhode Island pulls that out at home, but only make my line 2. So here are the 4. I'm going to be taking the points with Yale, and then I'm going to be writing up the under, so my total 152. 863, 864 on the betting board. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, but you get both, as William and Mary is on the road going up against Old Dominion, and Old Dominion is a 6.5 point home underdog to this game between 155.5 to a 156.5. Set my line at 7. Wouldn't want to go past the 6.5, but I'm going to be willing to lay with William and Mary. I do like the fact that Coach Earl comes into this program after he was at Cornell a season ago and has really got them playing that same style that Cornell did, despite the fact that William and Mary, they were one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball last season. He retains a lot of a roster that was so slow, and he over at Cornell was running that team to a top 65 pace in all of college basketball, but it's a whole is greater than some of its parts team. They do have a little bit of a, shall we say, go-to guy down low in Noah Collier, who's been able to give you about 14 points, 5 boards per contest, but you've got a lot of guys like the Dorseys who are able to give you about 10 or so points per contest. They have been dealing with the injury to Caleb Dorsey, but Gabe Dorsey has been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, 11 points per contest. Keller Boothby, who followed him on over from Cornell, has been able to give you about 6.5 points per contest. Kyle Frazier, he's been able to give you about 6.5 points per game, and as a matter of fact, you just take a look at this team right now, and you've got essentially 10 different guys that give you between 5.5 points per game, and then you've got one guy, Noah Collier, that gives you 14 plus, but everyone else in that like 10.5 point per game range. So a lot of equals with regards to this team. And for Old Dominion, you just don't have a lot going for this team. They lost at home to begin the season against Buffalo. I like Sean Dewar-Gordon, who's able to give you 11.5 points, 6.5 boards, comes on over from Siena, but this is just not a good offensive team. They're shooting 26.5% from 3, 61% of the free throw line with 14 turnovers per game. You've been able to get about 14 points per game out of Robert Davis Jr. has risen up a little bit, and They still have from last year RJ Blakeney, but he just has not been able to develop. You've got a guy down low in Caleb Swenton-Roger, who began his career at Maryland. He's a true 7-footer that should be able to dominate the boards in this game, but for Old Dominion, they just can't really find anything from the outside. That's a big reason why I set my total at 153. I just don't think that Old Dominion does their part with this total, despite the fact that William & Mary is looking to gun it. So I am willing to lay up to 6.5 with William & Mary, and with this total, set mine at 153 in on the under. 865, 866 on the betting board. It is Air Force. They're on the road facing off against Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio, a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. So this game is 133.5. Set my total at a 135.5. So I'm going to be in on this total over for Air Force. It has been a very interesting run for them with Bo Becker being out. That was one of their top scorers from the season ago, but you've seen Ethan Taylor be one of the better do-it-all players in all of college basketball. Right now, giving the team 18 points, 7 boards, 4 assists. Where is the support going to be coming from? You've been able to get a little bit of size down low, as you've got about 5 rebounds, 8.5 points per game out of Caleb Walker, and you've got some stretchability with this team, as he's been able to pop a few threes. Wesley Chelkowski, he's a true 7-footer. Let's give you 10.5 points. He's able to give you a little bit of 3-point shooting, but he's also at 7 feet tall, only giving you about 2.5 rebounds per game as well. And then you've been able to get 4 assists out of Jeffrey Mills as well, for a team that they turn the ball over 12 times per game, but for Air Force, they are one of the slower teams in all of college basketball. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the Rutgers transfer and Antoine Wolfork, I think, is going to be able to keep them lively down low. He's able to give you about 7 boards per game. And then Cam Kraft, who comes on over from Xavier. Travis Seal, as we know, used to be the coach over at Xavier, now at Miami of Ohio, shooting north of 40% from 3, 16.5 points per game. He's been able to transform this offense, as for Miami of Ohio, they've done a nice job generating north of 9 steals per game, headlined by Ian Elmore, who's been able to give you 2 steals, 15 points, 5 boards. Like the versatility of Miami of Ohio for Air Force, year in and year out, this has been one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. And Peter Suter, the Bellarmine transfer, being able to give this team a little bit more stability with north of 3 assists per game, I think sets Miami of Ohio over the top. Do you think that this has a chance to be close enough for late game filling? And both of these teams not doing the world's greatest job of being able to guard the 3-point line, so I'm in on the over. So my total 135.5, and willing to lay up to 7 with Miami of Ohio. 867, 868 on the betting board. Louisiana Monroe is going to be playing us UT Arlington. Arlington is a 6.5 point road favorite. Total on this game is 147, and with Arlington, I could only set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points for Arlington. This has been a pretty brutal defense, and they're looking to gun it. This is a top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, but against D1 competition, because they had one random game against a non-D1 team, but against D1 teams, they have given up at least 78 points in all but one game this year. They had one nice 58-point triumph against Austin Peay, but that's been about it. And UT Arlington just doesn't have a ton down low. Now, that might be changing with Lance Ware coming into the fold, but he was limited to just 17 minutes in that game against Rhode Island. I think that had a little bit more to do with foul trouble than anything else, but he could be really that force multiplier for the team. 14 points, 6.5 boards, a former top 75 recruit of Kentucky. You've been able to get good production out of Jaden Wells, who's been able to give you 15 points per game, but that's going to be the key for Louisiana Monroe in holding in this game. Being able to get something down low. I have Jerry Gogpot, who's been able to give you about 6 or so rebounds per contest. I like Adu Dediero, who's able to give you 4.5 rebounds. Doesn't give you a lot of scoring, though, and for Louisiana Monroe, last year as a collective, they shot below 30% from 3. It's looking a little bit better this year at 31.5% from the outside. Big reason why is Colty Young has come on over from Jackson State. He's shooting north of 40% from 3. 9 points, 2 assists, so he's been able to help out on that front. And then you've got Tyrese Watson, who I like. He's a little bit versatile. Last year he gave the team 9 points, 2.5 boards. He's been able to give you a bit more facilitation this year and a steal and a half per game, so Monroe looking to slow this game down. UT Arlington looking to absolutely run it and gun it. I think that you get something between A and B, but I lean a little bit more towards Monroe being able to hit the boards, make this a little bit of a grimier, yuckier game, even with Brody Robinson on the flip side. For Arlington being able to give out 3.5 assists and being a relatively good setting force in that backcourt. Arlington still turned the ball over north of 13 times per game. I do think that sloppiness costs you an over, so my total 145.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to take 6+ here with Monroe. 869, 870 on the betting board. It is Colorado, and they play a Pacific. Pacific is a 15.5 to a 16.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 144 to 144.5. Colorado, I did set them as a 19.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Recognize that there might be some residual effects of the Maui Invitational, trying to get their body clocks back online and everything like that. But now they've had a few more days than most of these other teams that returned from Maui, and for this Pacific team. They're very much looking to the guys that have been brought in by one Mr. Dave Smart. Dave Smart used to be a coach out there in the country of Canada, and he brought with him a nice Canadian dynamo who's been able to give you about 8 boards, 17.5 points per game, in Elias Rolfo, I really like. For Pacific, they're only shooting, though, about 29% from 3 and the 13 turnovers per game. That's a bit of an issue. You've got some size with 7-footer Jazz Gardner giving you about 5 points, 5 boards per contest, and you've also had Elijah Fisher, who comes in from Texas Tech. As Smart spent a year or two over at Texas Tech as well. He was able to bring with him Fisher, who's able to give you 17 points, 5 boards, and also Lamar Washington, who's been dealing out right around about 7 assists per game, but for Colorado, their non-D1 guys that they have brought in have really been able to hit. It's Trevor Baskin. He was over at Colorado Mesa last season. At 6'9", he's able to give you 9.6 boards. He's able to give you versatility to pop threes, along with the NAIA All-American Elijah Malone, who's saying 6'10". He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3, despite being like 275 pounds, 13 points, 4.5 boards. So team's doing a really good job of being able to hit the glass down low. And then Julian Hammond has been a nice find in the backcourt as well. He's had to be the do-it-all guy after last season. He was a little bit more of an ancillary scorer, shooting north of 40% from 3. 12.5 points per game. With Colorado, they've got a really good home court. You're seeing Javon Ruffin be a little bit up and down this season, but I think that he'll be able to find his consistency in the backcourt. And for Pacific, still very much a work in progress team, despite the fact that they've won their last 2 games. As those came against Cal State Fullerton and Arkansas Pine Bluff. Do you think that this is going to be a little bit of a step up? You've got a Colorado team that has been able to be pretty consistent in terms of their offense as well. So did somebody tell at 147.5 in on the over and willing to lay up to 19 with Colorado. This last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, and another game that I'm going to write up. Nevada is playing us at Washington State. This is 871, 872, with Nevada being a 9.5 point favorite. Total is 146, and with Nevada, go ahead and set them as a 5.5 point favorite. Right now, Nevada is shooting north of 45% from 3-point range. No team in college basketball last year shot above 41% from 3-point range, and I do think that Washington State going to be able to step up a little bit more with their 3-point shooting defense. Overall, on the road this season, opponents against them are shooting less than 31.5% from 3-point range, so a little bit to be encouraged about there. Now, when it comes to this Washington State team, it's pretty much Eastern Washington 2.0 because they bring over the coach in David Riley. They bring over so many of those top scorers like Dan Erickstrup, who's right now giving you 12.5 points. He is right now shooting 39% from 3-point range at 6'10". Cedric Coward right now dealing with a little bit of an injury, and that's something that you need to be keeping in mind for. He missed the team's last game. Would not be surprised if he misses this one as well. He's a heart and soul guy that's able to give you 17.5 points per contest, but Luwan Watts has been able to step up down low, and Nate Calmezzi is doing a nice job being able to give this team some facilitation. Spent some time at Lamar. Last year was at Washington, a little bit of an injury-riddled year, but 2 seasons ago at Lamar, he was giving that team 17.5 points, shot it well from 3-point range. He's been able to give this team just some good facilitation in general. Washington State does need to dial it back with regards to turnovers, about 15 turnovers per contest, but even though Nevada has been a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they don't necessarily generate a lot of steals, and for Nevada, Nick Davidson has been great down low, 17 points, 7 boards per game, but I do think that not having that main man in the backcourt like a Gerard Lucas was from a season ago, going to be hurting them. You've got Kobe Sanders who's come in from Cal Poly. He's currently shooting north of 60% from 3 with 16.5 points per game, and then been able to get some good versatility out of Trey Coleman, who's giving you 4.5 assists, 10 points per contest, but I do think that in the end, for Nevada, even though they're going to play a little bit more smart with regards to the basketball, and I know that Cedric Howard is dealing with his injury, it's just gotten a little bit too lofty for them. Did somebody total 147.5. I think that Washington State really going to be looking to push tempo in this game as they have been all season long, so in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Washington State. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-607, 306-608. It is Georgetown, and they play OC UMBC. Another game that I plan on writing up is UMBC, a 14.5 point underdog. Tonight's game, it is 154.5 to a 155. Set my line at 13, so I'm going to be willing to take the 14 plus with UMBC, but writing up the over. UMBC on the road this year. Top 10 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They are well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Going up against a Georgetown team that they found their footing a few days ago against Albany. They were able to really light it up. They put up 100 points on the board for Georgetown. You got Micah PDV, who's been able to give you about 16 points per game overall for Georgetown. The main guy that I look at that can really be able to elevate them is Thomas Sorber. The freshman has come in, giving you 14.5 points, 9 boards. Georgetown shooting just 30.5% from 3-point range. Should rebound as Malik Mack just feels like he's doing a better job in this offense. He was over at Harvard last season right now, giving the team 13 points, 4.5 boards, and now has had 3 turnovers or fewer in each of his last 5 games, so he's really been able to clean up his act on that front. And you still have a nice tandem of scoring Jaden Epps. Last season, he was logging for the team about 18.5 points per game. A little bit of a setback this year thus far with 13.5 points per game, but I think that'll shoot up. And then you've got on the flip side a backcourt headlined by Bryce Johnson along with Marcus Banks, who for UMBC have been able to combine for north of 29 points per contest. They really lack a lot down low. You've got the Columbia transfer Josh Adewundu, who's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, but for UMBC, I do think that this is going to fall off a little bit, but overall they're shooting 40.5% for 3, albeit I think that there was 1 or 2 non-Division I games in there, but even for how fast they play, they turn the ball over about 10.5 times per game. They run some pretty clean offense. Do think that Ace Valentine, who's giving you just 7 points per contest, going to give you a little bit more as the season goes along as well, so do think that UMBC, despite having a little bit of size disadvantage, holds in there with their backcourt. I'm going to be writing up the over, and I'm going to take the points with the UMBC, set them as a 13-point dog. 306, 609, 306, 610. Loyola, Maryland, it's the road they're facing off against Coppin St. Coppin St is 6-point home underdog. Total on this game is 132. Set my total 132.5. I'm in on the over. Fully recognize that this is a Coppin State team that last season was second worst in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and let's call it what it is for this Coppin State team. It's very much less than savory, but I do think that for Loyola Maryland, they themselves are going to get a little bit flattened with regards to their defense. They've given up 80+ in 2 of their last 3 games. You've got Milos Ilic, who's able to log nearly 10 boards, 14.5 points per game. Love what he's been able to bring for this team. And then you've got Braden Speed, who's been able to give you about 3 assists per game. For Loyola Maryland, it's just all about having some of these guards being able to step up, as they've got Tyson Commander back from a season ago, but just has never really been able to take that next step forward. He's giving you just 7 points per game, and I was certainly expecting a lot more out of someone like David Brown III, who he last season gave the team about 5 points. He showed some nice flashes of greatness, and this year he's still averaging about 5 points per game, just has not been able to take that next step forward. And then on the flip side, you've got a Coppin State team that has Cameron Brown, who's been able to give you about 3 assists per game. He's been able to come up after he was a non-Division I transfer, and he's been able to give them a little bit of versatility. Julius Ellerby, the transfer that comes in from Eastern Michigan, 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, a little bit of versatility there. And then they've got a top scorer in Darius Ward, who he's right now out of the fold. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for this Coppin State team, and as a result, I just can't back them in this spot. Now, I do think that Coppin State is going to rise up with their 24% three-point shooting, but I do think that Loyola Maryland going to attack a Coppin State team that they themselves have now given up 83+ points in 3 of their last 4 games and 90+ in 3 of their last 4. So I do think that with Loyola Maryland, they're going to be able to get their offense online. So my total 132.5. So here at the 132, like the over, and I'm willing to lay update with Loyola Maryland. 306, 611, 306, 612. It is Bryant, and they hit the road face-off against Drexel. Drexel is a 1-1.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 151 to 151.5. Made Drexel a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay 1 with them. Wouldn't want to go much further, but with Drexel, I do believe that with this game being out there on their home floor, that they're going to be able to find a way to get it done. And for Drexel, I was wondering how they would recover after losing Amari Williams in the transfer portal. Cole Hargrove, who was behind him in his shadow a season ago, he has been very versatile at 6'8", 11.5 points, 9 boards, 3 assists. Really love what he's bringing to the table for a Drexel team. Has never been amazing with regards to their offense, but they're doing a nice job shooting it from 3 thus far this season at 38%. Do think that there's going to be a regression here. Kobe McGee is right now shooting 48% for 3 with 16.5 points per contest, and you've got on top of that a guy, Yami Butler, who 2 seasons ago shot 45% for 3. This year he's shooting 21.5% for 3-point range. That should be coming up a little bit, but you also have a guy that's able to give you about 5 boards, 8.5 points, and Shane Blakeney, who I really like as well. Good versatility there. And then for Bryant, you've got Earl Timberlake bringing sexy back, 14 points, 5 assists, 7.5 rebounds per game. And for Bryant, unlike in past seasons under Phil Martelli Jr., now they're starting to use the full allotment of their bench. They're starting to give a few more minutes to someone like a Connor Withers. You're starting to be able to see someone like a Cam Ferris be a little bit more of a off-the-ball scorer, though he's only shooting 25% for 3. It's more of a career 38+% three-point shooter. That think that should be on the rise a little bit more. Even someone like a Ja'Kai Robinson, who comes on over from Miami, where he's just pretty much riding the bench the last few seasons. He's found a little bit of a role for the team as well, but Rafael Pinzon has been that main man, 17.5 points, shooting 55% from 3 for a Bryant team that's currently shooting 40% from 3-point range. I do think that that's going to tick downward. Drexel, traditionally a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, has been a little bit more rough for them recently. recently, but I do think that they're going to slow down a Bryant team that they themselves have been able to play some pretty rock-solid defense. Bryant, a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So total 147.5, like the under. I'm with Drexel. I'm willing to lay up to 1 with them. 36-6-13, 36-6-14. Another game I'll write up as Tulane is going to be playing against Southeast Louisiana. Southeast Louisiana is 6.5 to a 7-point dog. Total on this game between 139.5 to a 140. Right up Tulane, I feel like they should be a double-figure favorite. Set them as a 12.5-point favorite. For Tulane, I recognize that it's been a little bit up and down for them, but they have been shooting it much better at home rather than on the road. At home, shooting about 36% from 3, 26.7% from distance on the road. If you got Caleb Banks, the Indiana transfer, has been able to log for this team 16.5 points, 8.5 boards, shooting 45% from 3-point range. Now, did miss the team's last game, and I expect him to be out once again. That does hurt them a little bit, but now you're starting to get more out of the Citadel transfer. And Asher Woods, last year he was just a no-show after 2 seasons ago at the Citadel, was averaging about 14 points per contest. Now he's been able to give the team more like 10 points per game. Rome Brumbaugh has been a nice facilitator, 5 assists, of fewer than 2 turnovers per game. And for Tulane, they've dialed back their tempo a little bit more. They're now outside the top 80 in terms of total possessions per game. Last year they were a top 10 team with this regard, but they've done a nice job keeping things clean with about 11.5 turnovers per game. And for Southeast Louisiana, they're right now about 290th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I like the pickup of Sam Hines Jr. from South Florida, 14 points per contest. Career only about 21% 3-point shooter, currently shooting 40% from distance. Do you think that that's going to tick down a little bit? But they should be able to hold their own down low. Brody Woodbury, he's a 6'11" big man that's currently giving you about 5.5 boards per contest. And Carlos Paez, he throughout his career, he is playing in his 6th year of college basketball. Every year aside from this year, he's been able to give out north of 3 assists per contest. I think that he'll lend Jacavion Buckley, who comes over from Lamar, a little bit more help in terms of the backcourt. But I do think that Tulane, even if they are without Caleb Banks in this game, which I am expecting, they're going to take it to a Southeast Louisiana team that has had a tough time with regards to their offense as well. It's a Tulane unit that they fell on some rough times with regards to their offense in that multi-team event against the likes of Belmont and Wyoming. But I think that this will be a nice bounce back at home. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And did set my total 148.5. Tulane still a pretty up-tempo team going up against a Southeast Louisiana team that has not really been able to gel on defense. So looking at the over in this spot, and I'm willing to lay with Tulane. 306-615, 306-616. It is Jackson State, and they are going to be on the road against St. Louis. St. Louis, a 19 to 19.5 point favorite with a total of 154. Semi-total 153.5. So here at the 154, I'm in on the under, but I'm willing to lay up to 3 touchdowns with St. Louis. I did set them as a 21.5 point favorite for the St. Louis team. Getting back Robbie Avila is big, and took him a game or two to be able to find his sea legs, but now he's back in full force. In that last game, we saw St. Louis be able to put up 90-plus points, so very good sign. And you got a Jackson State team that is still without Deshaun Ruffin, who is a All-American back when he was in high school. He started at Ole Miss a few seasons ago, just as not been able to get out there on the floor. And looked like they were finding a little bit of something in Jalen Tatum. He was averaging like 6 points, pair of assists per contest. He's now out with an injury. You've got Romeo Mansell down low, giving you about 7 boards per contest, but he's been dealing with a few off and on injuries as well, as he's missed a few games. He missed that most recent game against Lipscomb. Without him, they scored just 53 points in that one, and this is Jackson State team that's just getting completely blasted on defense. 77-plus points allowed in pretty much all their games as far as this season, but they just have not been able to generate any offense, which is a big reason why I'm going to be in on this total under as well. For Jackson State, they have been able to exceed the 62-point plateau just twice thus far this season in their 7 games. They're shooting as a collective 27.5% from 3 with 16 turnovers per game. They just don't have a clear facilitator. They don't have a single guy that gives you north of 2 assists per game. Meanwhile, for St. Louis, you got clean flowing offense under the new coaching staff of Josh Schertz and company, with Isaac Swope leading the way right now with 19.5 points per game, 5 assists. And for St. Louis, 12 turnovers per game is not too bad considering how up-tempo they are. And additionally, they should be able to dominate the boards with Kalu Anya, the transfer from Brown, being able to give you 11.5 rebounds per game. You've, as a matter of fact, got 3 different guys with Avila, along Kelton Thames, all give you at least 5 rebounds per game. So I do think that for St. Louis, they've got Avila firing all cylinders once again. Got a guy in Gibson Jimerson who are off the ball, shooting a career north of 40% from 3, 45% this season. They should take it to Jackson State. I set my total at a 153.5, so at the 154, like the under, and I'm on to lay with St. Louis. I wrap things up with 306-617, 306-618. It is Chicago State on the road against St. Thomas. Another game that I'll write up as totals between 140.5 to 141.5. St. Thomas is an 18.5 to a 19.5 point favorite, and I did set my line at 16.5. I'll be willing to take the points with Chicago State, but wrote up the under as I set my total at 136.5. St. Thomas playing a little bit more up-tempo this year. They've been more of a mid-tempo team, but throughout their lifetime at the D1 level, first 3 years, they have been outside of the top 270 in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that they're going to be dialing it back towards the middle part of the season. I think that was a matter of circumstance as why they're playing so up-tempo, but for the Chicago State unit, 359th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The Presbyterian transfer in Jalen Force as we have a log for the team, 9.5 points per game, and right now for Chicago State, they're turning the ball over 14 times per game, and they've got absolutely nothing down low. Quincy Allen looks to be good to go for the team once again after he was dealing with a little bit of an injury. A former top 200 recruit who's they have a log for the team about 7 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but he's the only guy in the roster that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game. This team's hallmark last year was generating turnovers, and they're still okay at being able to do that. You get a steal and a half, 7 points per game out of Matthew Robinson. He's a freshman that I think has a little bit of upside. Gabe Spinelli, he is the coach's son, actually, has been able to give you about 8 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, as a bit of stat sheet suffer. And then for St. Thomas, do still have a few question marks with this team. They lost a lot from a season ago. It's not like they're doing an amazing job down low, as Kendall Blue has been your top rebounder with 4.9 rebounds per game. Ben Ustaban has been able to give you 7 points, 4.5 boards, currently shooting 54% from 3 as a 6'6" freshman. So that's been quite impressive for St. Thomas. So typically this is a team that does a really good job of taking care of the ball. They're now at 13 turnovers per game. That's way higher than what we've seen in past years, losing a lot of guys via the transfer portal and just due to graduation last year, clearly taking a little bit of a toll, but you still have Drake Dobbs who's able to give you 3.5 assists, 11.5 points per game. So I do look at this spot overall. Do think that Chicago State holds in there. I'm willing to take the 18.5 plus, but do think that this is going to be a slow control game, going to be riding up that under as I set my total at 136.5, and that'll wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, which means I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. By the way, big thanks to Rob Donaldson for joining me in the previous segment, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.